Russia already this year has lost 160,000 lives for the acquisition of 1,600 square kilometers of Ukraine. That's less than 0.7 kilometers of Ukraine. No major cities have fallen since 2022. In terms of trying to isolate Sumy Kharkiv, either an envelopment or something like that, that would be significant if they could get near those cities. Is that achievable in this summer? I don't think so. I don't think it's a tactical reality at all. Firstly, I think you have to look at the framework of the battlefield to understand what Ukraine are trying to achieve by this, and also what Russia are trying to achieve by what they do. So we break the battlefield into what we call deep, close, and rear operations. The close operations are those on the contact line, and where, for example, Russia is trying to get across the kill zone, which is currently dominated by drones and artillery fire. The deep battle is that which seeks to either degrade the combat potential of the forces and stop them from joining the battle, or to erode the economic potential of the country so that you're compressing the timelines for the collapse of a country economically, or its war potential of its sinews of war. That is really what Ukraine is doing. I don't see this as a tit for tat in response to the attacks last weekend by Russia, because if you're doing massive attacks, and the last attack last night on the night of the 27th, 28th was 296 drones, you need to gain the intelligence and the targeting information to do that. So in terms of what we call a joint prioritized target list, there will be a target list which they're going through, and then if those targets don't get through, then there'll be a re-attack on those targets in subsequent time and space to try and affect an outcome. To give you an example of that, recently, so on Monday, the Ukrainians hit the Alaburga industrial zone in Tatarstan. That's 1,000 kilometers away from Ukrainian territory, which just shows you the reach that the Ukrainians have these days. And a lot of this is not actually with Western weapons. They now have their own two different types of Neptune long-range sort of cruise missiles which can do that. But the point was, this was the third strike in 2 months on that Alaburga industrial zone. And you do that for two reasons. Firstly, you do a battlefield damage assessment on the targets, generally with satellites at that distance, to see if you're successful or not successful and whether you need to re-attack. And also, as the Russians are doing, which is why the success rate of their recent strikes has been somewhat better, you then do a thing called the measurement of effectiveness assessment. What worked, what did not work, what telemetry might you alter, what sort of do you tweak on your weapon systems, the attack angles, heights, all those sorts of things, which might give you a greater chance of success. So it's trying to affect the deep battle, eroding the economic potential of Russia, which makes sense because you've got a continuum from producing this stuff. And if you look at the two big attacks, one of them, for example, last night was on the microelectronics plant in Zelenograd. That is where they make both microprocessors and semiconductors, which can be used in radar systems, air defense systems, and missile systems. So if you can take that out at source, you're not ultimately down the line going to have the weapons at the front line. So that makes sense. So it's in this deep battle that they're trying to affect this change. Now, of course, one of the things which could happen in the next few weeks is, I think it was significant that Chancellor Merz of Germany mentioned that there were no targeting caveats on the use of Western weapons. Now, for the last few months, they probably haven't on the French and UK weapons. I think this is a precursor to probably the Germans giving the Taurus system, which would be significant. That's not to say it's a war winner, looking for a decisive weapon of war is always the thing that people talk about. It isn't, but it's got a different profile, different type of warhead from the US, UK, and French ones. And therefore, for example, it might be more effective as something which could penetrate, should the Ukrainians wish to do it, the Kerch Bridge, for example. There are two things you have to separate. The first one is the war getting too big? Now, the intelligence chief of Ukraine, Budanov, said last September that there may be two reasons in 2025 that Russia seeks some sort of ceasefire. The first one is that they need a break due to a lack of insufficient strength. And the second one is because of the impacts on their economy, where they reach the apogee probably in 2 or 3 months' time and everything starts to decline from there on in. So separate that, the economic sort of effects and the equipment effects, from what they're probably seeking to do, which is, we know that their minimalist position is the sort of 4+1, that is Crimea and the 4 oblasts that they don't fully occupy, but say that Ukraine has to recognize the territorial realities of in any future settlement. That's Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. I think what they're doing is twofold. Firstly, they're trying to get some sort of buffer zone in both Sumy and Kharkiv. And also, I think that if they do get a toehold there to any significant effect, then it might be that they're not then talking about 4+1, they're talking about 6+1, because it could be that they then say, well, this is our territory. They then go for another illegal annexation there, that then from their perspective becomes non-negotiable down the line. Now, are they going to be very successful in that incursion or their potential incursion? I think one of the things we've been looking for in the last couple of months is whether, if there were an incursion or an invasion, and we're talking about 50,000 troops at the moment being across the border, whether that, again, in terms of the American posture, would be a decisive point where Trump says enough is enough, and that tips him over the hill in that he would say, we absolutely know now that Russia are not interested in negotiations and we should go all out and support Ukraine. That has always been the line, for example, at the right of arc on the what is called the Helsinki Commission, which reported last September under Joe Wilson, a Republican from South Carolina. His view has always been that, and the Helsinki Commission looks into Russia-US relations, that at some stage Trump would come to the conclusion that Putin is not someone you can negotiate with, and that he would therefore take the gloves off and unequivocally support Ukraine. I don't think we're anywhere near that in terms of the conundrum that Trump has got himself into. In terms of the activity which has been going on there, Russia already this year has lost 160,000 lives for the acquisition of 1,600 square kilometers of Ukraine. That's less than 0.7 kilometers of Ukraine. No major cities have fallen since 2022. So in terms of trying to isolate Sumy, Kharkiv, either an envelopment or something like that, that would be significant if they could get near those cities. Is that achievable in this summer before we get to the sort of raputitsa, the sort of mud which comes with the sort of autumn and winter? I don't think so. I don't think it's a tactical reality at all.